the why behind an MBA, right, is very important for an individual to understand, and that why would differ from a person to person, right? Her why would be different than my why, which would be different than a third person's why, right? So I think understanding that is very important.
हेलो एवरीवन, वेलकम बैक टू एक्सपर्ट्राइब। आज जो मैं पॉडकास्ट करने जा रही हूँ दैट इज़ ऑन MBA और मेरे साथ हैं शरण और सान्या। शरण ने अपनी इंजीनियरिंग परस्यू करी VIT से एंड देन ही डिड अ मास्टर्स इन US, वर्कड फॉर अ फ्यू इयर्स एंड डिड हिज MBA फ्रॉम शिकागो बूथ। Sanya did her CA, worked for a couple of years and did her MBA from National University of Singapore. हम लोग अलग अलग तरह की बातें करेंगे कि when is the right time to do MBA, क्या स्कॉलरशिप होती है इसमें, कितना खर्चा होता है, जॉब प्रॉस्पेक्ट्स क्या होते हैं, सब के बारे में ट्यून इन करिए इस पॉडकास्ट पे।
So Sanya or Sharan, I would like to ask you from a very basic question that what has been your journey and how did you decide to do an MBA?
I'll go first. So Deepshikha, मेरा background है that I did my chartered accountancy, which is CA in India. And after that was my undergraduate along with BCom. And after that, I worked for a couple of years in this company called Ernst & Young. So usme I used to do mergers and acquisitions consulting type of projects, which was great. I did that for 2 years. And then I thought I wanted some more exposure, something beyond finance, because my background totally finance mein tha. So I wanted to learn what are some other options out there. That secondly, I wanted some international exposure. And third, I also wanted to explore also from salary options, what are some better options out there. So for these three reasons, and also because मेरे family में there are already quite a few MBAs, so उनसे भी थोड़ी guidance मिली. I saw how their careers changed post MBA. So through that guidance and these three reasons, I thought कि okay, 2-3 years work ex के बाद, I chose to do an MBA. And there are a lot of options out there. You can do an MBA in US, Europe, India में भी बहुत अच्छे options है. I eventually chose Singapore because long term I wanted to live here. So then I moved after 2-3 years of work. I moved to Singapore and did my MBA from National University of Singapore.
Great.
For me, I did my undergrad in engineering from VIT, and immediately post that I decided that I wanted to go abroad and kind of further pursue my studies there. So I decided to go to US and pursue my master's of engineering degree. Post that degree, I started to work. I primarily was working in financial services. I started off working for a bank called US Bank. Was there with the company for a few years, and then again moved to an insurance company for post that. And as I was working out there, I just started to think, what should I do next in terms of my work? And I soon realized that if I want to have a career in functions such as strategy, finance, I need to have a much more academic rigor and an understanding of these fields. So that was a primary motivation for me to then kind of pursue MBA. A second point also was to kind of explore what opportunities are out there, right? I think I was quite comfortable in where I was, and I wanted to explore and pursue other opportunities. So those are the two key drivers for me to then go ahead and apply for an MBA and then pursue an MBA.
Generally, मैंने ऐसा देखा है कि MBA becomes a very obvious choice for candidates who are suffering from their regular job fatigue, and then MBA helps them climb the corporate job ladder. But I feel this shouldn't be motivation to do such a degree. What do you think, and why do you think that is the case?
I think so. There's two parts to this. I think first is कि in India, a lot of people choose to do their MBA right after undergraduate degree. Suppose आपने bachelor's कर ली, BCom कर लिया, engineering, whatever you're specializing in. Right after that, many people choose to do an MBA because they think this is something I want to do. Let me just, finish it off and then start my job. But you would have noticed for both of us, we didn't do it that way. We first did our studies. We took some experience. Then during that experience, aap thode mature hote ho, you get some more exposure. You learn a bit about business world. Then sometime during that path, you will be mature enough to know कि you want to do an MBA or not. At least that's my view. सब चीजों के pros and cons हैं. And during those years, you will see your career path कि can I grow in this role, in this company, in this function without an MBA, without incurring that big cost, and still I have the same path. वो आपको पता चल जाएगा when you're doing your this thing. That is one set of people. So for me, that was not the case. I loved the job I was doing pre-MBA, but I still wanted to explore. I wanted to make a change geographically also. I wanted to move outside India at that point. और मुझे थोड़ा सा अपना function भी change करना था. So doing both those things together without an MBA was a little tough. So that was my driver for MBA. But just doing it ki nahi, I want to do it because everybody is doing it, my opinion is not the right reason, because then there's a lot of money involved also for your fees and relocating and paying in dollars. So it has to be a well thought out, I feel, for the right reasons, like I mentioned. For example, a lot of my colleagues around me in Amazon are not MBAs. Some of them are from the best schools of the world. Some of them are not. But a lot of us are doing similar type of jobs. But हमारे path different रहे हैं because we've all taken the path that suited us. So that's why I think it needs to be a well thought out decision कि जिसको जो suit करता है.
Yeah, the only couple of things to add there is the why behind an MBA, right? Is very important for an individual to understand, and that why would differ from a person to person, right? Her why would be different than my why, which would be different than a third person's why, right? So I think understanding that is very important. And the other point, as she mentioned, right, just to add on to it, I've seen people who have grown vertically within an organization without an MBA as well. I think what on average an MBA helps you to do is it certainly fast tracks your career a bit. So on average, I think a person will grow a bit more faster. But then again, that it's not a recipe for, like, it's not always a recipe where you're going to get success. So yeah, I think in the long end, things always average out, right? So but yeah, that's the only add I would say.
So MBA karte karte, what are the learnings? What are the skill? How does it add value to your profile?
I think I'll tell you what I took away from my MBA. And of course, this can totally vary from experience to experience and where you do your MBA also. So for me, I think number one is, for me, I felt that MBA was like a second chance. You do your undergrad, you do your job, and sometimes a few years down the line, you think, this is not what I want to do. Now I'm stuck. So I went for my MBA. I explored all the options, and funnily, I realized I love what I do, and I went back to kind of similar. I stayed in finance. But now my mind is broadened. I know exactly what are the options out there, and how I had the option of doing those other things, which I think pre-MBA I did not have. So one is options. It opens a lot of doors, which pre-MBA I felt were not open for me in job vertical. Second is, I think now I have got the opportunity to live in Singapore, and through MBA, I was able to do an exchange semester where I went to the US, and our school gave us exposure to travel to China. And these are places I think before I would not have explored career options in these places. So it gave me broad-mindedness as well. And thirdly, I think something that I really took away was the network. Of course, I had a lot of friends and before in the CA world, but they're all people who think and act like me, who've done jobs like me. But in MBA class, people will come from all different backgrounds. Koi engineer hoga, I even had a doctor in my class. And I met PhD people like yourself. And there were a lot of different people, different backgrounds who think differently. So up now I have contacts with people in different industries with different backgrounds. So jo discussions happen in class, they are very interesting because it's not like-minded people saying the same things. So that exposure and that network that you get in your class is quite, I think it's quite valuable. But again, between Sharan and me, the network and the exposure we had was also quite different, because I did my MBA in Asia, and he did his MBA from, the one of the top schools in US. So we talk about it. So there are quite a few differences in that also, but this is what worked for me.
In terms for me, like what I got out of an MBA, right? Like three broad categories, right? One is like if you look at academic sides of it, other definitely as Sanya mentioned, right, the network side of it, and third is from a career perspective, right? So from an academic perspective, I have a background in engineering, but I was very post my studies, and while I was working, I was very curious and interested to learn more about finance. Uh, so academically, when I attended my MBA, I was very uh, I was very focused on taking certain courses which I knew would help me grow and learn those concepts, right? So academically, I took a lot out of my MBA in that sense. In addition, I also got an opportunity to do a lot of other various activities, right? I got an opportunity to be part of a startup, to do some social consulting projects for non-profit organizations, do some work in private equity as well as venture capital. So an MBA provided a lot of experiential learning as well as academic learning for me, right? So that is number one. Number two, on the network side, I made a lot of good friends while attending my MBA. As Sanya mentioned, right, people of various different backgrounds from different countries come together and pursue an MBA. So just to kind of hear everyone's thoughts and perspectives on a similar topic and have an engaging discussion is something that is very unique, and you don't get to get that opportunity on a daily basis, right? So that is number two. And the number and to add on to number two, right, is also once you graduate, you also become part of a broad alumni network, right? So any country you move to, or any place you travel, you can always hit up alumni and kind of catch up with them, right? So it's a good networking opportunity in that sense as well. And number three, from a career perspective, right? I kind of hinted a bit earlier that I got to do different things while I was pursuing my MBA. So that helped me kind of decide what I want to do next post my MBA. So kind of getting that more clarity on what I want to do next, and then having that platform where we have recruiting that happens on campus as well as outside of campus to then further build your career. I think it definitely helps from the career perspective as well. So those three things to kind of summarize. One was the first was the academic, the network, as well as like post MBA, your career trajectory, right? That is something that those three things are something that I took away from my MBA.
So when do you think is the right time somebody should start researching about the MBA, the schools, and what is the right fit for them? When should they start doing that?
This is also a very subjective thing. So I was actually the youngest in my class. So I had 2 years work ex when I started my MBA. I think Sharan had few more than me. So I guess in my view, it totally depends. There are people who do it right after undergrad. There are people who do after 2 years like me. There are people who do later on. I think for me, I can only speak for myself, but for me, I think it kind of worked out, because the kind of jobs and opportunities my other friends were getting, I felt I had a similar kind of opportunities just a little earlier in life. So I felt 2 to 3 years work ex, or maybe even 4. So maybe 3 to 4 years work ex. After that, you get a little bit maturity. I think that's a very sweet spot to do your MBA. So you should start thinking about it maybe 1 or 2 years before. That's my view. What is your view, Sharan?
Yeah, on a similar sense, I think if you look at programs, right, all from good institutions, at least in India, they promote like you can immediately join them immediately after your undergrad, right? And then there are also other programs in India and internationally, which kind of require at least minimum of 2 years of experience, and kind of on average, like in my classroom, I think we had 4 to 5 years of work experience, right? On average, right?
Yeah.
So, in my personal opinion, I believe you should have at least 3-4 years of experience under your belt before you pursue an MBA, for the following reasons, right? One, when you get into a classroom and when you do a case study or when you are having an engaging discussion, you want to make sure that you have actually experienced there, right? What they do in the B schools are, at least in the US, is where they give you case studies, right? And in those case studies, you explore a problem that a senior executive, such as a CEO, is facing in the company, and he or she is trying to make a change, and you're exploring from his or her perspective whether that change makes sense or not. But if you haven't worked in an organization, you would not understand what potential difficulties a CEO is going through, right? It's easy to say, okay, let's cut 20% of labor force. But if you haven't worked in a corporate and you haven't seen people losing jobs, if you haven't experienced some of those things, it's very difficult to take away certain things, right, from a course and have those discussions. So you won't have that viewpoint. That's number one. Number two, there are many courses that require a certain set of experience, right? So to give you an example, I took a course called Managing an Organization, right? It essentially involved understanding like what are the different motivations of people, how different organizations work, so on and so forth. And if you haven't really worked in an organization, if you really don't understand how the corporates are structured and all that stuff, right? It's very difficult to kind of then imbibe those concepts. Otherwise, you are just listening from 1 year, you're trying to process it, but since you haven't experienced it, it's very difficult for you to retain them a few years down the line.
Yeah.
But if you have been in those shoes, you kind of realize, okay, what is being said makes sense, and probably this is what I should take away from it, right? So I think your takeaways become much more crystal. I think for those two reasons, having an experience prior to pursuing your MBA makes more sense. When a person should start looking to do an MBA, I think it's totally subjective. It could be 2 years down, like 2 years into the workforce, or 4 years, or 5 years, or 6 years into the workforce, right? It just depends on the individual. Essentially, for any B school, I think internationally, either a GMAT or some version of GRE or some other version test is required, right? And those tests are applicable for 5 years. So you can start the prep work for those tests and then decide over those 5 years whether you want to go ahead and pursue your MBA or not, right?
Yeah.
So that also gives you a bit of more time to think through whether you really want to pursue it or not.
So Sanya, I would like to ask you, like, pose different questions to you. That what is the procedure if you're applying to an Asian school, and what is the procedure if you are applying to a US school, for Sharan?
Sure. I think procedure for both is pretty much similar, but the experience is very different. And I'll share for me. It's similar to what he said. You have to give one like this aptitude test kind of thing, which is called GMAT. And it's been quite a few years since I've given it, but I think they used to have 2 or 3 sections. One is to test your English, and which is verbal, and second is to test your mathematical skills. There was also some essay writing for 5 points. So there's 3 parts to this test.
They added logical reasoning as well now.
They added logical reasoning also as well now?
Yeah.
Okay, got it. So so this is, it's not a very difficult test, but yes, I think the sooner you start your prep, you can aim for a higher score. And I think even in India, there is one school called ISB, Indian School of Business. They also take GMAT. So I had to take the GMAT. I did that 4 to 5 months before I started my application for MBA. So that one test I did. Other than that, you have to write essays. So I had to write 3 essays, and every year the business school changes their questions from NUS. So some of the questions could be like, I don't remember my questions, but it was somewhere around the line, tell us one time in your life which helped you think that solve a business problem in your work life or something like that. So, or it could be a totally personal question, whatever. So they'll have 3 different questions, 300 to 500 words. So I wrote those essays. I got them edited by my father, by my ex-boss. So the essay writing, it sounds a little simplistic. 300 words doesn't sound like a lot, but it actually takes quite a lot of work. So I did that again 5 to 6 months before I started applying, because I had to start thinking about what stories from my life I want to share. So first was the aptitude test, then my essay writing. Then you have to attach all your transcripts from all your mark sheets and whatever scholarships and awards you've got in the past. This whole as a package, you submit. Oh, there's one more thing, references from your ex-bosses. So I got references from 2 of my ex-bosses to write a letter saying, Sanya is good at whatever, or these are things she can improve at, whatever. So your boss submits directly to the school. You don't get to look at it. It's whatever he wants to write. So all of this together is packaged together as an application for your MBA. After that, if you are shortlisted, they will let you know in a month or so. So I applied in October. By November, I knew I'm shortlisted. Then I had to go through two interview rounds where somebody from the school, either alumni or the head of MBA or current, so the dean of the university, whoever, it could be anyone, will interview you, ask you questions for about 1 hour. After that interview, 1 month later in December, they let me know that you have got admission. And then I had to sign and pay some upfront fees or whatever. And then by January, they let you know the shortlists for scholarships, because most of these universities have scholarships as well. So we did not have a separate application process for that. Just from your interviews and your application, they just let whoever they wanted to give scholarships to. So that was my application process. It lasts anywhere, the actual interview and all that lasts only for 1 or 2 months, but the prep for it starts, I think, 6 months before.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, similar kind of checklist for applications in the US.
Okay.
Primarily, you give a GMAT exam, you get your letters of recommendation. So you prepare a list of your manager as well as some other recommenders that you want to give up to the universities, and then you prepare your essays. So every university has their own essay questions, so you prepare for those. And once you submit those 3, if you get selected, then you will be interviewed by either a current student, alum, or someone from the admission office. And basically post that, if you get an admit, you just join, I guess.
Yeah. I think one advice I would give is, for me, I gave my GMAT pretty last minute, only a few months before my admission started, because I had a very hectic work life. But if somebody can give it even before, it gives you sufficient buffer time in case your GMAT score is not so good. Because fortunately, unfortunately, all Indians do very well on GMAT because we are very academically inclined. So usually the bar for Indians for GMAT is quite high. Everybody does so well, and we are such a large population. So you want to give yourself ample time. Suppose your first test doesn't go well, and you have buffer time, you can re-give it. It's totally allowed to re-give your GMAT and then do better. And then whichever is your better score, you can submit that. So if you want to do your GMAT even 1 year before your MBA, I think that would be, if I could go back in time and change, I probably would have given it earlier.
Okay. And what is the cost? Because it is a very high costing course. What is the cost in an Asian school versus a US school?
So that is significantly different. So I did my MBA. I started in 2015, which is 6 years ago. So I don't know what is the current MBA cost, but back then, my fees was around 55,000 Singapore dollars, which is how much? 30 lakhs? 30 lakhs, somewhere around 30 lakh rupees, 30 to 40 lakh rupees based on current exchange rate. That is my school fees. And I think that is pretty comparable to the Indian school of business in India. But I also had scholarship aids, the one that I shared with you that in January they gave the list out. So I had 1/3 scholarship fee. So I paid only about 20 lakhs. Other than that is your living costs. So depending on the country you choose, the living cost can really vary. So in Singapore, cost of living is quite high when you compare to India. So living in the hostel, food, and then depending on your personal entertainment, etc. choices, those are your separate costs. But school fee itself was somewhere around 40 lakhs for me.
And the scholarship you mentioned, is it given to all students in Singapore, or you pass some criteria?
No, they do not give to all students in Singapore. Otherwise, it would be a free course. but but there are a lot of avenues of getting scholarships. So I saw for a lot of my friends, their respective countries were giving them aids and scholarships. There were international banks who were giving scholarships. But I was not, being an Indian female, I was not eligible for a lot of those. So the only bucket which applied to me for my background was the scholarships which were being given by my NUS admissions office. So they had limited slots. And again, they also had different types: scholarship for women, scholarship for academically inclined people, people who have had good grades their whole life, people who are like into sports or whatever. So there were different categories. And they did not interview me for it. They just went through my profile and they gave it. So it was not given to everybody. And I'm not sure to how many people they give, but it's given to a small percentage of the cohort. So for me, it was in the academic and professional achievement category. But yeah, there are different categories that unfortunately, I think we do not have other avenues of scholarships from Indian government or something like that. But the university supports.
For the US, the fees vary, to be honest, anywhere between like 70,000 to 150,000 US dollars. I think that for 2 years, that's a tuition fees, which comes up to, if you roughly do the math, from anywhere from 50 lakhs to 1 crore in terms of tuition. If you're targeting like the top 10 schools or the M7 schools, what they call it, it's typically on the higher end of that range, right? Again, you can buffer some of those costs by the scholarship aid that the school gives you. So that's one way of kind of subsidizing it. Second, if you have worked for a few years and if your company itself wants to promote you, or wants to, like, has asked you to kind of go ahead and pursue your MBA, so they sometimes kind of buffer some of that cost as well. But yeah, I would say tuition wise, it's roughly for top schools around $150,000. And then, as Sanya mentioned, right, your staying expenses are plus. And then once you're part of this cohort, you're going to travel to countries and so on and so forth. So it does become a bit expensive, to be honest. Yeah.
But having said that, I'll just add that it sounds like a lot of money in the beginning, but you want to assess your return on investment as well.
Exactly.
Because your profile can also change post MBA, may or may not change. It's not, like you said, it's not a hard and fast rule for success, but some avenues or some ideas I can share for recovering part of your cost while doing MBA, at least things that worked for me. One, of course, is scholarship, but a lot of that is not in your control. There's very little you can do about it. But beyond that, you can work as a teaching assistant for your professors. You not only get knowledge, but you get paid for it as well.
Right.
And it doesn't take more than a couple of hours in a week. You help to grade test papers, attend few classes, and just help your professors. That is one way. Second way is internships. I think the main reason, so I actually came out net positive money from my MBA. That's mainly because of my internships that I did. I did a part-time internship along with my classes. And then in the summer, you get an option to do full-time internship also. So, but that means extra work. So less social life, but that's a choice. You have those options. So I'm not saying it will cover all your costs, but it will help you. And then after that, once you get your first job, a lot of companies also give you signing bonus. Not everybody, but some give you signing bonus that helps you pay off your costs. And most of my friends that I know in my circle, whoever even took loan, there are very low, cheap loan options also for international MBAs. Don't necessarily need to take only from India, because India has high interest costs. A lot of them have paid off their loans after a few years. So I know pre-MBA, it sounded like very, very expensive to me that, oh, I cannot afford this. But once you mature and grow in life, I think you are able to cover those costs. A few years down the line, of course.
So from your experience, I think it's worth it from both of y'all's.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it's worth it.
I recommend it.
Yeah, so I would like to take Sharan's take on this. That how does the cost versus return play out for a US school? So because the cost is pretty higher on that side.
Yeah, so it's similar to what she said, right? You get to do internships, which for like 12 weeks or so, right? Which kind of helps you a bit as well. And then definitely post MBA, most of the offers that you get from campus usually come up with a hefty signing bonus, right? And that kind of helps you to make some payments to your loan, to service your loan. And then essentially what you need to look at is where you were pre-MBA in terms of your salary, right? If say it's X and post-MBA, where are you, right? It's going to be X plus 50%, X plus 100%, X plus 30%, right? And then you got to see like incrementally, then that helps, that incremental jump in your pay helps you to kind of then pay for the education itself. But that jump differs from people to people, right? Because it differs from the geography also you're working at. Like certain countries pay you differently, right? So a lot of that also comes into becomes a factor eventually. But essentially, I think what she said is very much applicable for USB schools as well. You can pay off your loans in a reasonable time frame, but that a lot of it also depends on an individual, right? There's no it's not black and white in the sense that, oh, you can pay off in 3 years or 4 years or 2 years. It lot depends on what opportunities you have got post MBA, what roles you are pursuing, what your own personal lifestyle is, so on and so forth. So yeah, but in terms of recommendation, I would like to reiterate that I highly recommend it. But you just need to be a bit more careful, especially when you apply in the US, because I think as part of an MBA, you get to work for 1 year, and then then you need to apply for your visa, and if you don't get a visa via lottery, then you have to go back to your home country or find a job in some other country, right? So some of that return becomes a bit hazy, right? You're not certain when you accept an MBA admit. So there's a certain amount of risks involved in going and pursuing education abroad. So a candidate should always like look at those risks as well, to ensure that they are not kind of over leveraging themselves by taking a lot of loan, and then ending up for some reasons not getting a job, or not being able to pursue education because of visa, not able to pursue their work because of visa reasons.
Because everybody's personal situation is also different.
Correct.
So if they have commitments at home, etc. I think what Sharan is saying is sometimes what happens is, and I totally agree. I'm so happy you brought up this point, because you take a loan in US dollars, and sometimes for visa, US, I think visa is a bit challenging, right? It's just it's a mile to mile, nahi mile to nahi mile. It's a lottery system, and then if you have to come back to, let's say, India, and then you earn in Indian rupees, so you took a loan in USD, but you have to pay it off in INR, can be a bit challenging.
Correct.
But
interest rate. Yeah.
So even if you study there, the visa is a lottery, because like in Singapore, if you study there, you get a 1 year period of visa that you can be there and search for jobs.
In US, it's 1 year post MBA.
Okay.
And then within that 1 year, you need to get your visa approved. And that's essentially a lottery, right? So they have a fixed number of slots to whom they will give out a visa. And say those slots are 60,000 and 300,000 people apply, then the odds of getting selected is 20%, right? So you just need to be a bit careful as you evaluate like studying abroad, specifically in the US. Yeah.
Okay.
But a strategy a lot of my friends have taken is, or even I would have taken if I was in the US, is after your MBA, you can join a global company. And if your visa works out, that's great. If it doesn't work out, they can transfer you internally because a global company have offices everywhere. So they can move you to London or Singapore or India in Bombay. There are a lot of great locations. So that's also one strategy a lot of Indians like us take.
Again, that's not like certainty, right?
Yeah, there's
like
no certainty.
Company,
it's all.
It again depends on scenario to scenario. Certain companies are more flexible in that way that they don't want to lose a talent.
Yeah.
But certain companies are like, they have different hiring strategies and they would probably not let you transfer internally.
That's a good call.
Yeah.
तो ये था हमारा MBA का पॉडकास्ट का पार्ट 1. हम पार्ट 2 जल्द ही रिलीज करेंगे. आई होप आपको इन्फॉर्मेशन यूजफुल लग रही है. अगर आपके MBA रिलेटेड कोई भी क्वेश्चन है तो आप कमेंट सेक्शन में ज़रूर डालना. एंड हमें सब्सक्राइब करना मत भूलना क्योंकि हम हैं एक्सपर्ट ट्राइब. वी आर हेल्पिंग यू चेंज योर स्टोरी, चेंज योर लाइफ.